There is clearly a very significant buy-in on green at the institutional level. And by this I mean that the government is leading the discourse on what is green and how to get there. There is also a rising civic discourse on what green lifestyles might mean, and there are non-institutional players that are entering the fray. To give you an example, the Kampung campus development in Khatib is perhaps one of the most elaborate examples of what is happening at the grassroots levels. This campus is designed by a non-profit organization as a place where they can inculcate awareness and an appreciation of nature, of community farming, etc. Community farming, coincidentally, is one of the things that is gaining ground amongst the population. And this seems to stem from an innate desire to reconnect with nature and to take control of our lives in the urban environment. One of the most important things that we've done in recent years is to change the regulatory framework that governs the way in which the built environment develops. To give you an example, green building certification is now mandatory for all new buildings over 5,000 square meters. There are also specific targets that have been set for how much certification Singapore will attain by 2030. One of the best known targets is that 80% of all buildings in Singapore will be certified by that year. Currently the figure is somewhere around the 21% mark after about 9 years of green certification. I think that we also have done well on other fronts that look at the wider condition in the urban environment, and I quote from figures from the sustainability blueprint. For example, the amount of skyrise greenery that has gone up from 2009 to 2013 is 10 hectares to 61 hectares. That's a huge increase. The amount of green space that is from 2009 to 2013 has gone from 3,602 hectares to 4,040 hectares. The amount of water bodies, open water bodies that have been opened up for recreation has gone up from 650 hectares to 959. So you can see that there is a kind of a multi-pronged approach which looks at different aspects of the built environment, from the extent of public transportation usage, the amount of green space that we have, the access that we have to green space, and also to the way that our individual buildings perform. I think that when we talk about the constraints or obstacles to urban design, the most cited is the limited availability of land and the many competing uses for land. And so a lot of what we talk about today in terms of green design, or the bigger question of sustainability, is really about making better use of what we have. Yeah. And so this extends to the question of resource dependency. How can we manage our own water? How can we manage our own energy needs, minimizing our dependency on imports? How do we live with environmental risks, for instance the haze that we encounter every year? Is there a way in which we can design indoor environments better so that during periods of haze, for instance, we can at least retreat to better quality of air indoors? We are also confronted by a wider question of climate change. I mean, this year, for instance, we had a protracted drought that saw very little rainfall from January to March, I think it was. And this, of course, puts pressure on our urban landscape, on our water bodies and our resource availability. Climate change also threatens us in other ways, if not directly, then indirectly. How will we cope when food becomes a global challenge? Meaning to say, when food production in countries that we traditionally import from, like China and India or Malaysia, becomes limited or restricted due to problems of climate change faced by those countries. How do we bring a measure of self-sufficiency into our city so that we become less dependent on the external world. These are the external factors that are pressing down on us, that are forcing us to rethink the way we do business and the way we design the built environment, how we use land, and in what way we integrate different needs of the country. There are other obstacles facing Singapore. Some of them are internal obstacles, which have to do with how we have usually done things. Yeah. Which then become impediments to innovation. And I think that one of the things that we are striving for now, and I think that this is an emerging development, is how we create what we call deep integration, not just buildings and parks and water bodies, but these things kind of connected in a way that we have not seen before. In ways that maximizes the value of each and creates a synergy. Just to give you an example, there is a project in Singapore that represents this idea of deep green or deep integration, and that would be Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park, in which the park, which is a recreational space, is also a hydrological force. It deals with stormwater runoff. It also creates biodiversity. So when you go to this park, you see flora and fauna that you may not otherwise encounter in other parks. This kind of approach, where the whole is greater than the sum of parts, yeah, is something that I think we are continuously striving for. But this is the internal obstacle of how we approach problems, yeah, and therefore, in the way that we define problems, how do we seek solutions that are innovative and get us further and faster? I think that we have translated our visions into very clear institutional framework for implementation. And so we have different bodies in Singapore that are charged with looking after different aspects of the urban development. For example, the URA, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, Housing Development Board, the Land Transportation Authority. Each of these has a mandate of looking after an aspect of the urban development. What perhaps distinguishes Singapore is its long-term visioning and its sort of integrative thinking. About 15 years ago, when we first started talking about green and sustainable, it seemed as if sustainability was procured through technological acquisition, that if we could just get the technology right, we would fix the problem. The bigger question that governments have to deal with, cities have to deal with in discussing sustainability is people. Cities have to be livable in order to be sustainable. Yeah. And a key part of that livability is likability. Yeah. We have to like where we are. We have to feel safe and feel healthy. And I think these are very important things that Singapore realized very early on, long before the word sustainability was coined. Yeah. Our garden city idea was about livability. By making the city greener, we were in effect making it more livable for the people and for visitors who came to Singapore. I mean, these ideas predate the entire discussion of sustainability. So in many ways, the formula or the kind of paradigm that we've used to drive development is now, parts of it are now becoming important to the sustainability debate worldwide. Yeah? So when we talk about green cities or when we talk about livable cities, well, many of these ideas have been in place in Singapore a long time ago. Yeah? And I think this is where we are unique. Very often when you visit eco-cities or cities or buildings that are trying to be sustainable, you find this kind of excessive reliance on technological band-aids, as if we could just get the energy question right, we'd all be okay. I think that's incomplete, and this is where we have something to offer. Our experience in making the city more livable and therefore working our way towards an idea of sustainability. This is what we have to offer the discussion on sustainability.